Right, this video looks at adding and subtracting rational numbers when they are in fraction form. So much of this should be review from previous years. Basically today we're just going to look at, remind ourselves how to add or subtract fractions. And you'll remember that the most important rule with this is that the denominators, the bottom number in a fraction, they must be common or the same. Okay, so for example, if we were given 2/3 and we were asked to add 4/6 to it, okay, we can't just add them as written right there. We would need to first make sure that the denominators, right, are the same. Right now they are not, so we're going to need to switch them. We're going to try to find a common denominator. Now, this is a pretty simple example. A common denominator between 3 and 6 would be 6. So we could convert this 2/3 into an equivalent fraction that now has the denominator of 6. In order to do that, we would have to multiply each of the numerator and the denominator by 2. So the equivalent fraction would be 4/6. Therefore, we would now have 4/6 plus the other 4/6. Now we have denominators that are indeed common. That means we can simply add up the numerators. 4 plus 4 is 8. We keep the denominator the same. The final answer would be 8/6. Okay, so that should be review. We'll have to be able to get the denominators to be common. Okay, another thing we have to remember. When we are subtracting a fraction, or subtracting any number for that matter, any rational number, it is the same as adding the opposite. Okay? This is a nice little trick to use in order to make sure that we're not going to make mess ups later on when we're subtracting. You'll see it in a future example that it's important to sometimes switch it to make sure that we're adding the opposite instead. So, for example, if we were given 2/3 and we were asked to subtract a -1/10, okay? Instead of doing it as written, we could say that that is equivalent to 2/3, and now we're going to add the opposite. So the opposite of -1/10 is a +1/10. Okay. Now we need to come up with a common denominator, so we can do this, right? 3 and 10 are not common. A common one between them, though, would be 30. So we're going to rewrite each of these fractions as equivalent fractions out of 30. The first one, we needed to multiply 3 by 10 to get 30. Therefore, we multiply the top with 20 out of 30 plus 3 out of 30 is going to equal 23 out of 30. Okay? So you see how we were able to solve this original problem that maybe looks a little confusing with all these negative signs. It makes it much easier if we just switch it so that the subtraction of the fraction becomes instead an addition of a fraction by adding the opposite. Alright, so we are going to add and subtract some mixed numbers. Now remember, mixed numbers are when there is a whole number or an integer part of the number and then a fraction part of it. There's two primary methods in doing this. I'll show you each of them, and then you're going to be able to pick which one works best for you. So, first method is to rewrite the mixed number as an improper fraction. Okay, so, this would be if we had an example such as 3. Oh, sorry. We'll erase that. We'll go 3 and 2/3. And we'll add that to a -1 and 3/4. Okay, so this method is rewriting the mixed number as improper fractions. Okay, so improper fractions, we're going to write 3 2/3 as an improper fraction, and remember the method for that is to take this number out front, multiply it by the denominator, and then add the numerator. Okay, so 3 times 3 is 9. We're going to add that 2. We now have 11, and we keep the denominator the same. Okay, do the same one over here. We have 1 times 4, add 3. 1 times 4 is 4, add 3 is 7. We have a negative 7 over 4. Okay. Now, can we add them? Well, not quite, because we have we don't have common denominator, so we need to come up with a common denominator between each of these. So we will write it as common denominator between 3 and 4, 12. Okay. So to get that, we're going to write it as common ones. 11 over 3 is the same as 44 over 12. And then we're adding that to a negative 21 over 12. Okay. 44 plus a negative 21 works out to 23 over 12. Okay, so that's the first method. We simply just start out by switching them back into improper fractions. Okay. Second method would be to add the integers first and then add the fractions. Now note, this is extremely important. Extremely important is that you only use this method for addition, not for subtraction. Okay, if you're doing a subtraction and you haven't switched over like we did previously, where you can treat a subtraction as adding the opposite, if you're going to treat it actually like a subtraction, then do not use this method. Okay? Use the method 1 instead. Okay? But if you have an addition one, this is an option as well. So, for example, negative 2 and a half, and we're adding that to 1 and 9/10. Okay, actually, so we're going to do a different example. Sorry, we'll say that's a positive 2 and a half. Okay, and that will just make it work out a little bit nicer. Okay, so this one says basically we can, because we're adding these fractions, we can simply add the integers and then add the fractions. So we'll start by adding the integers. 2 plus 1 is simply 3, and now we're going to also add the fraction parts. Okay, so we will do that over here. We'll go half plus 9/10. Okay. We need to convert those to common denominators, so we have a common denominator of 10, which means we have 5/10 plus 9/10 is equal to 14/10. Okay, so now, very simply, we combine both of those things. We have 3 from the integers, we have 14/10 from the fractions. However, this now is still 14/10 is an improper fraction, so we want to convert this all the way to a mixed number, and that would be, we're going to end up with 4 and 4/10. Okay, so that's a method that works well, but remember this important notice, only if you're doing addition. It just complicates it when you're doing subtraction. So if you're doing subtraction, better to use method 1. Alright, we'll do more examples like this in class. Hope that was helpful.